All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. As earth and the other elements, together with space, eternally provide sustenance in many ways for the countless sentient beings, so may I become sustenance in every way for sentient beings to the limits of space until all have attained nirvana. As the Sugatas of old gave birth to the bodhicitta and progressively established themselves in the training of a bodhisattva, so I too, for the benefit of beings, shall give birth to that bodhicitta and progressively train myself in that discipline. At this moment, my life has become fruitful. I have realized my human life. Today, I am born into the family of the Buddhas. Now I am a child of the Buddhas. From now on, I will forthrightly perform the actions befitting my family. I will act so as not to degrade the faultlessness and discipline of my family. Just as with a blind man finding a jewel in a heap of dust, thus somehow bodhicitta has been born in me. This is the supreme Amrita which destroys death, the inexhaustible treasure which removes the world's poverty. It is the supreme medicine which cures the world's sickness, the tree which provides rest for beings weary of wandering on the paths of existence. It is the universal bridge on which all travelers may pass over the lower realms, the rising moon of mind which dispels the torment of the kleshas. It is the great sun which puts an end to the obscurity of ignorance, the pure butter which comes of churning the milk of the holy Dharma. For travelers wandering the paths of existence, seeking happiness from objects of enjoyment, it is supreme bliss near at hand, the great feast which satisfies sentient beings. Today, witnessed by all the protectors, I have welcomed the sentient beings and Sugatas. Devas and Asuras rejoice. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So good morning. Lovely to practice together this morning, and wonderful, Eileen is here. So I'm going to start where we left off last week, because I feel that Eileen brought up really a significant question and a significant perspective of what do we really mean when we say that we're meditating? What do we mean by our practice in the form of what do we really understand as refuge, and how do we learn to trust in our own Buddha nature? So this is all under the category of putting in the chat box the current slogan we're working with. Slogan 23, always abide by the 3 basic principles. So we're at the 7 points of mind training. We talked about the view. We talked about very significant categories. I think this is category number 6. So we've really progressed to now, what does it mean? We learned how to evaluate. What does it mean in terms of actually committing to this training moment by moment in what arises in our life? And so we can think of it in terms of what do we do in a crisis? What do we do when we're feeling great confusion? Always abide by the 3 basic principles: dedication to our practice, refraining from outrageous conduct, and developing patience. And yes, last Sunday, we were talking about the 3 basic principles, in that the deeper meaning of this is abiding by the principle, we use the word vow, of refuge, of the Bodhisattva path. And in terms of the Vajrayana, we could say our inseparability from emptiness and interdependence. So I want to go back to our discussion when Eileen said, I'm not sure essentially what I heard was, I'm not sure what refuge is, and I don't know that I can totally trust Buddha nature. And they are connected. So that's why I want to approach both of these together, Buddha nature and refuge. So let's look at, for instance, how we have worked with the pandemic, which was a life-changing crisis. Our world as we knew it shifted. Everything that was impermanent was just so apparent to us. Our plans were gone. Our relationships shifted to isolation. Many people had family members who died. Our own health changed during this period. Maybe we were more sedentary. We saw that we couldn't avoid understanding our interconnection because we were dependent. We could see our dependence. We've always been dependent on many different kinds of people, but we could see it. If the farmers weren't okay, we didn't get food. If people didn't go to their, underappreciated and low-paid jobs, our world couldn't continue. We were dependent on the FedEx workers. We were dependent on the people who went every day to do their work at the grocery store. We were dependent on all the doctors and nurses showing up in extreme danger to their own health. All the different caregivers who support maybe ourselves and the people we love. The people who picked up the trash, I appreciated in a new way. So we so often in this culture and in this time think of, oh, well, I have to do everything for myself, and I have to, be able to rely on my own strength to do my whole life and to succeed, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't see, we avoid seeing, we are blind to, we have always been interdependent. And so in that understanding, we see that our joy and happiness is connected to the joy and happiness of many different beings all over the world, essentially. And we really could evaluate what we thought we took refuge in this crisis. So when we think of refuge, the word, I always relate because I'm on the sea and there are many different harbors here in Maine, but the safe port in the storm. I can't say that I sail, but the image of the harbor is very vibrant for me, or it's something I can really understand. So our safe port in the storm of the pandemic. And, what was it for you? Was it having a safe space? Was it having your bubble? Was it having the hospital's work and the store's work? Was it, I can count on my own strength, my body is not going to get sick? All these things we didn't see and understand were very, very impermanent concepts. So then what was it that wasn't changing in this moment of fear and in this moment of crisis? What didn't change is whatever we have taken in and understood in terms of having an open-hearted mind, not a fearful mind, but a contented, open-hearted mind. That actually is the only unchanging refuge. And we can see that the times in our life where we're able to touch base with this contented, open-hearted mind are not consistent. That for the most part, we're not abiding 24/7 in that space. For the most part, our fears break through and we cling to external kinds of security. But moment to moment, occasionally we do in our practice understand and realize that actually there are moments of my mind where bodhicitta has blossomed, and in that state I am open-hearted. In that state I am content. And it's as though we have to slowly, painstakingly teach ourselves, yes, we have these moments. Yes, this is what suffering looks like, and this is what not suffering looks like. When I'm clinging, remember when we were washing all the groceries that came into our house and washing all the bags and stripping our clothes off, the amount of fear of that anything harmful would enter our space that occupied our minds was really incredible. And we might sit down to meditate and for a moment touch base with that and move through our home, move through the grocery store, not in that state of fear, and be able to see the difference, suffering and not suffering. I was talking to a friend this morning who has been helping her mother, during intense elder care and illness, and really the transition into needing a great deal of help. And she was saying that when she found some really excellent caregivers, all of a sudden her anxiety was gone and she didn't realize she was carrying that anxiety. So we have to be able to distinguish the subtle levels of fear and resistance and clinging to our own comfort, our own safety, however we understand that, and the level of anxiety in that clinging and the level of suffering in that clinging, so we can see the difference of these moments in meditation where we can just be open. So I think that in our culture right now, just in general, it's hard to trust. We've seen all the institutions become untrustworthy. We've seen many spiritual traditions, including Buddhism, have untrustworthy situations. And so we have to really establish for ourselves, when we're looking for support in this path, what is it that we can trust? Because we see that our connection to our open-heartedness is unstable and momentary. But we can see that in those states, we are momentarily liberated from our gross suffering, and we are momentarily benefiting others. So until we can abide stably, we need support. So where is this support? So when we say that beautiful refuge prayer that we just recited in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. So we're saying until the vast understanding of bodhicitta is stable, until I have let go of the dualistic perception of self and others that keeps even as we're developing subtle layers of clinging that we're blind to, until that separation is gone, and until the bodhicitta is vast and unchanging, Vajra bodhicitta, we need support. So we can say, yes, there was a historical Buddha. Yes, the Buddha, we think had an extraordinary realization that was unique in this time. And there is a legacy of a lineage to the teachings that we're receiving today. And we can think of, well, this is like the Bible, it's something so mythical. Even if I accept it intellectually, do I make my home there in terms of refuge? And we may not be able to say yes to that quite so easily. So then how do we begin to have confidence in the realization that the Buddha had? And for this, let's say we have Shantideva's extraordinary text, or this Lojong text. So this came out of the realization of a human being, and I can see that the path is so clearly presented that I can trust maybe these people from the Middle Ages, maybe that they accomplished a great heart mind, but still it's not somebody I've met today. And actually, the Dalai Lama says, well, maybe it's good to put our trust in these distant historical figures until we have a level of confidence in some of the great teachers that we're studying, because our faith is not going to be shaken, let's say, in Shantideva. So, we can say, all right, the founder of the Drikung lineage, for me, Lord Jigten Sungön, I have his texts, and his texts are from maybe the 1100s. And I can connect to his vast heart mind that has inspired the particular family of Buddhism, the people that I'm studying with, and I can study all of their biographies and marvel at the dedication that they applied to keeping the teachings not only accessible, but lived and accomplished. So this is why in Tibetan Buddhism, it's not just the book, it's not just the text, it is also the lung, we would say the breath of the recitation from an accomplished person, passing the text directly to us, that is what is considered keeping the Dharma alive. And in terms of Vajrayana, we have people who have been acknowledged as having the capacity to give empowerments in terms of the ceremony. So then can we have confidence in those people? And the confidence is that we're asking for is, have these people really let go of their poisonous emotions is the word that we have, but have they let go of their confusion? Are they at the point where they're not falling into a confusion again? So I think in this time and space, we often give our trust too easily and then are devastated. So in our system, we are acknowledging that there is a point when our confusion is so diminished that we never fall back into gross confusion. And there is a point in which the confusion is entirely gone and only the vast heart remains. And we might say in our lineage that there are rare gurus that we count on who are like that we feel exemplify that. But you may not have met those people. Nonetheless, you might trust that they exist and are possible to meet. So you can tentatively put out a feeler to trust. And what then are we trusting? We are trusting that their Buddha nature has fully blossomed, that it is possible for a human being just like us to have such commitment to practice that it's gone way beyond intellectual understanding, and their realization is not separate from the historical Buddha's realization. Their heart mind has become so pure that there's never ever falling back. It's so interesting to me when I look at other systems. If we were to look at the Theravada system or the Zen tradition, they don't necessarily expect that their teachers have reached that point of complete realization inseparable from the Buddha's realization. They are much more understanding that many of the teachers are spiritual friends. They may have more practice history, they may have studied longer, they may exemplify maybe a little more wisdom, but there isn't any expectation that they are fully realized Buddhas. Their sense is the humanness in the wisdom is still apparent. So if one great teacher then is open about alcoholism, maybe it doesn't destroy their faith. There's an understanding that what the person taught and gave them, the wisdom that they had, was still productive and useful. It isn't a sense that, well, maybe the Buddha never had this wisdom, maybe this is not a trustable, reliable system to work with. And so I think we have to really distinguish that there are all levels of people traversing the path, and we see hints of their Buddha nature. And if we're fortunate, we meet some of the great beings who are living bodhisattvas, living Buddhas in this moment. And what then is the use of that in terms of understanding refuge? Once we see it's possible and we look these teachers in the eye and see their vast loving compassion and see that they have Buddha nature, then the major truth of Buddhism is all beings with mind have Buddha nature. So if we can recognize it in these great beings, then the truth of Buddha nature is there's also a seed inside us. So while we're on the path, we can take refuge in the Buddha nature that's visible in the support, or the Buddha nature that we would like to trust historically, and notice that, yes, we are growing and changing. Our capacity to keep open-hearted longer is growing. Our capacity to pause in a crisis is growing. That there is an interdependence with the support of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and our growth. As momentary as it might seem and be to us. And so when we are pausing in a crisis, we can stop and ask ourselves, in this pause, am I going to take an action that is closer to this open-hearted Buddha nature, or am I still caught in a refuge in the illusory aspects of samsara, the safe house, the safe bank account, the safe insurance money, the safe system we're living in? Do I still think that that's the unchangeable source that is going to give me a lasting, open-hearted, fearless, joyful bodhicitta, which is really the absence of suffering? Or is it the action that is moving me closer to Buddha nature that I know I have experienced just moments of, but those moments I know are definitely not suffering and definitely open heart? So that's why in this moment of pause, it is built on the foundation of refuge. The foundation that helps us remember, yes, it is those moments where I can see bodhicitta, where I can see and experience it directly. And I can, in my altruism, feel my Buddha nature wanting to wake up and expand. And I know when I move in that direction, it is moving me towards Buddha nature. So can I remember the historical figures, remember all the beings in the lineage that have brought the Dharma to me in this moment? Can I remember and gather courage from their commitments and their lives that help them move through this moment of pause and moment of crisis? Are there Dharma essentials that are so familiar to me that I can call on right now? It may be one of the slogans of, that we're working with. Drive all blames into one is one that I go back to over and over again. If you can practice even when you're distracted, always maintain a joyful mind. These slogans are meant to encapsulate the Dharma like a zip file so that we can call on them over and over. And can I rely on my community of practitioners who are struggling with the same things just like me? Can I join in community of practice to strengthen the wisdom element that will be by my side in the pause? Can I reach out to a friend? Can I ask my Sangha to remind me that these are the behaviors that have not been helpful or productive in moving towards an open heart, moving towards contentment? So until we have that Buddha nature inside fully blossomed, we're relying on supports that are outside, but we're relying on the supports that are outside, knowing that they are supports for what is within. That is a seed that is growing more wonderfully with every practice, with every study period, with every contemplation that we call to mind. So I'd like to really invite all of us to sit with this concept of what do we take refuge in? And is it illusory or is it not? Is it reliable or is it not? How do we understand for ourselves personally what refuge might be? And how might we become closer to a deep understanding of the support that it can be for us? So let's sit with this a few minutes. So before we move into discussion, I'll close the live stream. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So if we were to, from the perspective of wisdom, talk about external refuge, it's as though the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are saying to you, I believe in you, I believe your Buddha nature, until we can believe in it ourselves. So that is how it's a support. So thoughts or reflections